Hey guys, how are ya? I'm trying to silence everything here. I always forget something and I don't want anything to be super loud. Can you hear that? It's my dog itching. I don't know if you can see her. She's kind of hidden behind the table right there. The dogs, because we have those old, we live in like an old, like 100-year-old pier and beam type house. And so like anytime you thump on the floor, it sounds like somebody's knocking. So anytime the dogs are like itching themselves, we always yell, come in. So she's over there itching herself. Anyway, so if you're joining me for the first time, my name is Sunny Brigham. I'm a board certified clinical and integrative nutritionist. And I live here in Texas, Tejas, as the husband likes to call it. Yeah, I can't remember what else I was going to say. I did a live video maybe 20-ish minutes ago on Instagram about the Teal Pumpkin Project. So if you, since tomorrow's Halloween, if you haven't checked it out yet, head over to Instagram. It's in my story. Just kind of talks about the Teal Pumpkin Project. If you don't know what it is, it kind of gives you a rundown of what it is and how to participate. I highly encourage everybody to participate in the Teal Pumpkin Project. And that's it. Let's get started. So tonight we're going to talk about Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I have I don't know what that is. So I've put the blog somewhere in your screen, there's a blog. And that blog talks all about Hashimoto's. And we're going to talk about a little bit about Hashimoto's. We're going to talk about the background, and then we're going to talk about 3 things that you can do to thrive with Hashimoto's. And so let's preface this with, most people are going to say, well, I got hypothyroid, but I don't have Hashimoto's. And I'm going to counter that and tell you that Hashimoto's is the #1 underdiagnosed cause of hypothyroidism, but it is also the #1 cause of hypothyroidism. So you might actually have Hashimoto's and you may not know it. So let's kind of just talk a little bit about the difference between Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. So women are more susceptible to both Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. And Hashimoto's is essentially the autoimmune piece of hypothyroidism. So hypothyroidism, not hyperthyroidism, so hypothyroidism is basically, so your thyroid gland is a butterfly gland. It kind of, it controls a lot of the hormone responses in the body. It's linked to the pituitary gland that kind of controls how much thyroid hormone is released. And a lot of it is run by nutrients in the body. And so hypothyroid is actually a very common issue with women. And it's common because we're not really feeding our bodies the way that we should. So if you're overstressed, if you're undernourished, you're creating an environment where hypothyroid can basically grow. And so the goal is to kind of get you in my office so that we can get things kind of moving in the right direction before thyroid things start to happen. Now, Hashimoto's is the autoimmune piece of it. So let's first kind of talk a little bit about what autoimmune diseases are. So autoimmune diseases, there's basically right now 24 recognized autoimmune conditions. But researchers are kind of, so 10 years ago, I think the list was like 8 or 9. So they're constantly growing. And right now that they think there's close to 100 conditions that are rooted in the autoimmune process. And you really need 3 things to kind of get an autoimmune condition. You need the genetic link to it. You need environmental factors, and then poor diet. So all of those things are going to kind of lead to or breed autoimmune issues. Autoimmune disease develops because the body sees the immune system as a threat. And so the reason that food is a big piece is because, and I've talked about this ad nauseum before, 70 to 80% of the immune system lies within the intestinal tract. So if you're consuming foods that the body doesn't like, you are constantly activating the immune system. So every time you consume an inflammatory food, and inflammatory food is different for everybody. There are common inflammatory foods, but an inflammatory food for me is, so eggs, even though I don't eat them anyway, they are an inflammatory food for me. What else? Flax. Flax is an inflammatory food. Hemp is an inflammatory food. Olives and olive oil is inflammatory to me. So every time I consume these foods, my immune system activates. It says, I don't like this. I don't know why you continue to eat this. I'm going to let you know I'm not happy with you, and it activates the immune system. We see this outwardly by things like runny nose, itchy skin, bloating, gas, irritation, fatigue, but we just kind of link those to, I had a hard day, I'm a little tired. It's very uncommon that we actually link those to the foods that we consume. So when we consume these foods over and over and over and over again, we are consistently activating the immune system over and over and over again. Eventually, overactivation in the immune system causes the body to start attack itself. It's like, I'm a little woozy from all of this food you kind of put in my body that I don't like. I'm a little tired of attacking that. Let me go find something else I like. So it starts to attack, and I'm falling over. It starts to attack the body itself. So that's kind of how autoimmune starts. You don't have to have a very strong genetic link to autoimmune. Most people do have a little, bit of autoimmune in their history, but if you have a very strong link to autoimmune, that's the indication that we really need to take care of ourselves. Let's see. I talked about that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what Hashimoto's is and kind of how it differs from hypothyroidism, even though I kind of hit on that already. So hypothyroid occurs when something interferes with the thyroid's ability to produce hormones. So we have thyroid hormones. We've got various different ones. You've got thyroid stimulating hormone, T3, T4, reverse T3, free T3, free T4, and all that's kind of kicked off through the pituitary gland. So if you have hormone imbalance in general, if you have poor sleep habits, if you have poor dietary habits, if you don't really work out, just kind of overall poor lifestyle in general, you are creating a breeding ground for your hormones to go out of whack, specifically with the thyroid. We need specific nutrients for the thyroid, for all of these hormones to kind of process and do what they're supposed to do. Zinc is a really big one that we need for a healthy thyroid. Zinc is important to a lot of processes in the body, right? So it's involved in a ton of enzymatic reactions. But it's also a nutrient that when we are stressed or the body is stressed, we burn through that sucker like you would not believe. Most people do not have adequate stores or adequate intake of zinc in their life. And so over time, overstress, lack of sleep, lack of exercise, stress. I got to do this. Let me make a list for this. I got to get this done. I got to remember this. I got to take so-and-so here. I got to get this done. When we kind of have that lifestyle, as many women do, we are burning through those zinc stores that we have, and any zinc that we are continually taking in faster than we should. And so we're depleting our sources, which means the thyroid doesn't have much to use. Vitamin D is another one, vitamin A, selenium, iodine. Everybody's kind of going to sea salt, right? Everybody's on the sea salt craze. We used to do iodized salt. Now it's all sea salt. But if you're not getting iodine anywhere else, and a lot of multivitamins don't have iodine in it today for good reason, then where are you getting your iodine from? So eggs have iodine, seafood has iodine, kelp, kombu, seaweed, all of those have iodine. So definitely make sure that you're getting a good adequate amount of iodine in your diet. I don't particularly like supplementing with iodine. I definitely prefer people to get it food-wise, but there's a lot of nutrients that go into the thyroid process. So the most common complaint when it comes to hypothyroid, usually it's the first one that people start to complain about. There's other symptoms that they will see that they will kind of push off to other things, like dry skin, low libido, feeling colder than other people in the room. Sometimes I think that's just being a girl because my thyroid's great and I'm always colder than everybody else. What was the other one? Oh, loss of the outside of the eyebrows. So if you have really great eyebrows, but all of a sudden you're noticing that they're starting to thin that way, that's a good indication that we might have some thyroid issues going on. And then fatigue. So fatigue is a big one. A lot of people experience it, but it's usually the one that takes the woman to the doctor to complain about. And then what a doctor will do is run what's called a TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone. And they will test that level to see, okay, how is it? How are you doing? Is your thyroid okay? I don't take issue with this, but I feel like a lot of physicians don't go far enough. So a thyroid stimulating hormone can give you, so that panel can give you a good idea of how the thyroid is functioning in a very specific realm kind of snapshot. It doesn't tell you how the whole thyroid is functioning. It doesn't tell you what piece of the thyroid is malfunctioning, if any. So there's kind of a lot of labs that need to be done. So not just the TSH, but that's where a lot of physicians will start. The other problem I have with that approach is when the acceptable limits of a thyroid panel were set, whether it's the lower limit or the upper limit, they kind of took all of these studies of hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. So if your TSH level is low, you've got hyperthyroidism. If your TSH level is high, you have hypo. So it's kind of opposite. But how they established these limits is they looked at all these studies, and basically, if you got to this number, you had hyperthyroidism. If you got to this number, you had hypothyroidism. My issue with that is they don't take into account the many women that are kind of nearing those outward edges and complaining that they don't feel good. I don't feel good. I'm tired all the time. I feel like my body's just not functioning the way that it should. Doctor runs a TSH, looks at you and says, it's all in your head. Your levels look great. When in reality, you can feel like shit as you get to these outward levels, but you don't technically have hypothyroidism. They'll run different panels, and what some physicians will diagnose you as what's called subclinical hypothyroidism, where you're having a lot of the symptoms. Your labs aren't quite where they need to be for an overt diagnosis of hypothyroidism. So I kind of look at labs in an optimal range. I want to see where you're going to function best in this kind of closed off area. So if a female client comes to me and they have a TSH that's kind of high or nearing that upper range, I will work to get it back down, even though they technically don't have hypothyroidism yet. So that's kind of how hypothyroidism gets diagnosed. There's two labs that most physicians will not run, and it really pisses me off because they don't know why they won't run them, right? Most insurances cover them. Actually, even Medicare covers them. So I don't know why they don't run these labs. I haven't figured it out yet. Maybe one day I will. I am super duper 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 excited when somebody comes into my office and they bring me labs and they have these two very important labs on their thyroid panel. I get super excited and I immediately fall in love with their physician. And what it is called the thyroid peroxidase antibodies and the thyroglobulin antibodies. So on a lab, it'll say TPOAB and TGAB. Those are your autoimmune markers for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And those are important because the number one cause of hypothyroidism is autoimmune. It's Hashimoto's. But physicians won't run them, and I don't know why. Anyway, so if you have hypothyroidism and you have never had your TPOABs or your TGABs run, next appointment at your physician, make sure that you ask for those because you could have Hashimoto's and never know it. Now, I think that, and this is, I don't know for certain, but I think that a lot of physicians probably don't run those because the treatment for them does not differ. If you have Hashimoto's or you have run-of-the-mill hypothyroidism, they're not going to treat you any different. They're still going to use, like levothyroxine, aka Synthroid, or some people will put you on, Armour, or what's the other one? Natural thyroid, something or other. So it's basically the generic form of Armour. So they're going to put you on one of those prescription medications in order to get your thyroid functioning or to replace the function of that thyroid so that your body can not have so much fatigue. You can still process the hormones the way that you could, but that doesn't really repair the underlying cause. So if you take out your labs, if you have hypothyroidism, look at the labs that are on there. If you don't have TPOAB or TGABs on there, visit your physician, get those run, because the nutritional treatment for that differs greatly between regular hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So that's number one. Get those labs run if you don't have those run already. The next thing that we do is the nutritional approach. And so sometimes I have to write letters to physicians to get them to run labs. And one of those, and it's a letter that I keep on file because it's one I send often, is getting the TPOAB and the TGABs run. So some physicians will, if the client comes in and says, hey, I'm seeing a nutritionist, these are the labs that she has requested. I would say 85% of physicians will just run the labs. They'll be like, okay, I'm not there. Maybe they roll their eyes. Who knows what they do? Excuse me. But sometimes they'll come back and say, hey, my doc wants a letter from you. And that's fine. So I just type up a letter. And one of the things that I point out is that while the medical approach to treatment of Hashimoto's does not differ from hypothyroidism, the nutritional approach does. So if you have hypothyroid, we're going to work on increasing those nutrients in your body, see if we can't get the thyroid to start functioning the way that it should. That's a lot different than treating Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So I'm a big fan of what's called the autoimmune protocol. And I'm a big fan of this specific dietary approach because I have seen it work. So now there's a lot of different approaches when it comes to treating any type of autoimmune condition. But I like the autoimmune protocol because it's just a good diet. It's definitely hard to do, don't get me wrong. So this is key strategy number 2 is changing your dietary approach if you have Hashimoto's. So there's several websites out there. You can just type in AIP or autoimmune protocol, and there are tons of, blogs or people that are running through the autoimmune protocol on their own, or people that kind of promote the autoimmune protocol that will give you like, eat this, not that. They'll have recipes. What's the one that I use? Real Plans. So realplans.com is like a meal planning website. I think it's like $14.99 a month, but you can get an autoimmune meal plan through them. Once a month meals also does the autoimmune protocol. So there's it's kind of gaining momentum now. So there's a lot of options out there that maybe weren't out there 5 or 6 years ago for people following the autoimmune protocol. So you can kind of look at the autoimmune protocols 2 ways. It's either an elimination diet that's like on steroids, or it's a paleo diet on steroids. So it kind of follows the same 2 premises. So the paleo diet is all about kind of ancestral health and those sorts of things, but the foods that it removes are very similar to the foods that we're going to remove on the autoimmune protocol. The elimination diet is all about reducing inflammation. So taking out foods that kind of cause the immune system to spark off, because we want to stop that. And then taking out further foods that are further inflammatories. So when I have somebody that has autoimmune condition or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, if they come to me and they're like, hey, I want you to help me go through the AIP, great, let's get started. If other people don't really know what it is, the first thing that I'll do is we'll do some food sensitivity testing, because I want to start slowly and remove those foods. Let's get them used to having some exclusions from their diet, kind of transforming and cleaning things up before we dive into the autoimmune protocol. It is hard as hell to do, but when you get there, you will feel really good. We are removing, so here's what we remove. We remove grains, gluten, nuts and seeds, dairy, eggs, nightshades, which are peppers, potatoes. Some people don't consider potatoes nightshades. So peppers, eggplants. There's something else I'm missing. It'll come to me. Various spices, some herbs, caffeine. Fruit is okay, but it's in limited quantities. So you can see it's a pretty restrictive diet we got going on. So basically what it boils down to is it's like a meat and vegetable diet. Now, you can do this if you're vegan or vegetarian. Absolutely. It is just as difficult as it is for meat eaters. But you kind of get there. Some people go straight. They're like, let's rip the Band-Aid off. We're going to dive right in. And some people like to step down. And I really think it just depends on how their diet looks at the onset of when we start the autoimmune protocol. If there's kind of a lot of work to do with their diet, I prefer to step down. If their diet's pretty good, let's go in and rip the Band-Aid off and get you feeling better. But the autoimmune approach is definitely a great way if you have autoimmune condition, if you have Hashimoto's, to kind of really allow the body to start healing. This is a long-term dietary protocol, which means it's not something that you're going to be on 3-4 weeks and then magically you can start eating all these foods again. We need to wait until your autoimmune condition is in remission, and then we can slowly start to add these foods back in and monitor the condition to make sure, okay, well, if we just added brown rice in and your TPO antibodies are starting to climb, we know that brown rice is probably not for you. So we're going to keep rice out of your diet, but let's keep moving on. Let's add peppers back in and let's see how your body reacts with peppers. So it's a very slow introduction process, but you're kind of down at the baseline of the autoimmune protocol for quite some time. You could be there for a year, you could be there for 2 years, you could be there for 3 months. It's different for everybody, but review the diet, determine what approach you want, and get started. There are a ton of resources out on the web today. So that's number 2. So first way to thrive with Hashimoto's is get the lab testing done. Get your TPO antibodies, get your thyroid globulin antibodies, know whether or not you definitely have Hashimoto's versus just run-of-the-mill hypothyroid. Number 2, if you have Hashimoto's, or even if you have Graves', which is the autoimmune hyperthyroidism, autoimmune protocol, research it, find your approach, get started. You will feel amazing, usually pretty quick. It's usually once people get down to the bottom of the diet, it's within a couple of weeks they start to feel really good. And so the last thing that you can do to really learn how to thrive with Hashimoto's is make sure that you're healing the gut. So we've taken out the foods that are causing the inflammation. We've determined that we have, these lab levels, and now we have something to monitor. Now we need to do a gut healing protocol. And so this is a set of different supplements. It's different for everybody based on what food sensitivities you have, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, what you've tried. So it's a variety of different supplements that we try to get in there and allow the immune system to calm down, the intestinal tract to heal, so that you can start to heal the body and thrive. So that is it. But I encourage you, if you have hypothyroidism, and you pull out your last labs. If you don't have your last labs, get those. Get your labs every time you go get labs. Get them and have them, because at some point somebody's going to ask you for them, and it's good for you to have them. When you pull out your labs, see if you have the TPOAB and the TGAB on there. If you don't, next checkup, get those done so that you can determine if you have Hashimoto's or not. If you have Hashimoto's, start with the autoimmune protocol, determine your approach to it, get to it, start feeling good, and allow the body to heal. Thanks for joining me tonight. If you guys have any questions, you can post them below. Let me tell you what we're talking about. Next week we're talking about IBS. That's what we're talking about next week. And that is it. I hope you guys watch the Instagram video to learn about the teal pumpkin project. I don't know why I have a problem saying that. I tried to say white rice earlier. I couldn't say that either. I don't know what my problem is. So learn about the Teal Pumpkin Project. Enjoy your Halloween. We'll look at all the kiddos in their amazing costumes. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.